We're going to give everyone like maybe 2 more minutes, 1 more minute. Got a few people already in here. Feel free to use the chat and say hello. If you want to say hello to everybody, you can switch from panelists to panelists and attendees. Got a lot of people hopping in right now. Okay, give it 30 more seconds. Good to see lots of familiar names. All right. Okay, so we're at 8:30 on the nose. We're going to get started because we only have 30 minutes. So if you have a question as I am talking, again, feel free to put it in the chat, or you can use the Q&A area as well. They are both blank right now, so it's nice and ready for you to ask whatever you need to ask. Today, I'm going to be talking about some tips and tricks in SketchUp. It's sort of like a I just picked and chose a few of my favorite functions in SketchUp. Sometimes I call them my little magic tricks. So I'm excited to share those with you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And here we go. So this model that I'm sharing with you today, you may recognize if you were lucky enough to get into the KBIS booth or just see it briefly or see it on SketchUp's YouTube channel. So those of you that have made it this far, thanks for sticking with us through all of the technical difficulties of KBIS. I'm happy that you are still sticking with us today. But this house was featured in the booth and along with a video that Tommy Rouse and I made together for a family of 4 moving from the Bay Area to Lake Tahoe. So this is the resulting design of that. And I think that Aubrey or Aaron can toss that into the chat window, that YouTube video, and we just kind of go along some of the design challenges of this house, the before to this after design. So please do check that out. In that video, I did a few things, a few changes to the SketchUp model, but I didn't really explain how I made them. So today I want to talk a little bit more in depth about how I made those changes and a few more so that you all are in the know. So first step, we are going to talk about the fireplace area. So I'm just going to hop straight over there. And if you've watched the video, you'll remember that Tommy asked for all open shelving and to get rid of this base cabinet. So this corner is a little bit dark and having the shadows on isn't great for active modeling. So I'm going to go ahead and turn those off. And next up, I'm going to go ahead and scrap this base cabinet, and we're going to give this all open shelves really quickly using something called an array. So I'm going to double click into this group. And this chair is in my way, and oftentimes I know that folks get kind of lost in a wall. So it's good to use a function called hide rest of model, and I'll talk about how I got there later. But now I've just isolated this geometry here to work on just this without everything else getting in my way. So we want to get rid of this base cabinet. I'm just going to go ahead and select that and hit delete. And I built this in a way that I can move these pieces independently of each other. These are grouped so that I can just select this and get rid of it. Same thing with these shelves. These are components. So I'm going to get rid of all of them but one. So this guy is going to be our original, and we're going to make some copies of it. So I would like 5 or 6 shelves all along this span here, and I'm going to move it all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to hit my up arrow and drop it all the way. And I'm actually sinking this into the floor. And I'm going to grab a copy of it. M for move plus option. That's going to create a copy. And I'll do this a few times. If you've never used the move copy function, it's super handy in SketchUp. It's way better than copy paste or cut paste. I highly suggest getting used to it. Okay, so I'm going to drop the first copy all the way up here, and I'm actually going to drop it into that header there. And the reason for that is this is just my template to let SketchUp know from here to here, I'm creating copies equally spaced. So I've set that down, I believe. Yep, I set it down, and I'm going to type 5/enter. So now I have 5 copies plus the original. And I think I'd like to add one more. So I can actually just override that last number. So I'm going to type 6/enter to give myself 6 copies and plus the original. So I'm happy with that, and I don't want to leave these shelves, in the floor and in the header, so I'm just going to get rid of those and click out into some white space here and close out of that group. So I like the spacing of these shelves, and I didn't have to do any of the math for that, but now my accessories are kind of floating around, so I can either just adjust them manually, straight up the blue axis there, or I like to use a extension that Aaron or Aubrey can drop into the chat, the link to that. It's a free extension. It's called Drop GC. And I don't need to select that guy. I'm just going to select my accessories and right-click, choose Drop GC, and I'm going to drop those guys right down to the shelf below. All right, so I'm going to click off of that. And so floating objects are super common in SketchUp, and that extension just drops them down to the face that's right below it. So that's a really handy, quick tool to not have to mess with moving things up and down. So some of you may have noticed this fireplace over here on the right isn't showing through. I'm going to talk about that in a moment, a handy little trick for that. But first, I wanted to really drive home the function of creating an array by talking about our kitchen stools. So in the video, Tommy, please I'm gonna tag that one away. That's all right. Tommy wanted 4 stools here instead of 3 because it is a family of 4. So we're gonna go ahead and use that array function to see if we can fit 4 total here. I'm gonna click on my preset working scene here and orbit a bit. And actually, I think I'll just go ahead and go to top view. That's under camera, standard views top. And I'm going to drop it to parallel projection as well. If you're on a Mac, that's Command 1 for top view. Okay, so now I can see everything in a 2D view. And I've got some cabinets over here, so it's out of my visual right now. So I'm just going to turn on my X-ray mode. And that's another custom shortcut that I've set. And now I can see the span that's allowed for my chairs here. So I'm going to delete these 2. And from this view, I can actually get a little bit more specific, more easily, in my opinion, in 2D. I hop back and forth from 3D to 2D quite a bit so that I can space plan and then see things in perspective. So in this view, I'm going to grab my tape measure tool, T for tape. And from this edge over, I'm going to give myself 4 inches. And same with this, this little post here. I'm going to draw straight along that red axis 4 inches. And those are the parameters. I don't want my chairs to get closer than 4 inches to those edges because nobody wants to sit right up against the edge of something like that. So I'm going to move this first chair over and meet up with that intersection. And now I'm going to grab it from this side. I'm going to tap my Option key or Control if you're on a Windows machine, and click and release on this red intersection there. So I've set down my first copy, and I'm going to type 3/enter. And it's creating 3 copies plus the original. So I can see that I can easily fit 4 chairs there total. All right, so next up, I am going to go back to the fireplace. Actually, let's talk about the sink first. Go ahead and click back on my working scene here without the ceiling on. And those with a sharp eye can probably see that this chandelier here is slightly forward, and we'll fix that later. But right now, we're going to talk about the sink. And this is a super common question with interior designers, is how do I cut a hole in something the same shape as my sink? How do I cut a hole in my countertop? Because my sink is really round, especially in bathroom sinks. We've got those super round sinks that are hard to cut a hole so that we can see the bowl of the sink there. So SketchUp actually makes it really easy. I placed this sink in the area where I'd like it to be, and it is a little bit proud of the countertop. I can still see the top rim here. Next up, I'm going to double click into this group, this island assembly, until I can reach the face level. So I need to be able to click on and select this face. Now I can right click, intersect faces with model. And I'm going to hide the rest of the model and show you what happens. So right click, intersect faces with model, makes it so that anything that was touching that face, it's going to create geometry. It's going to create these edges. So now I have a face the same shape as that sink. And this one's pretty rectangular, but again, if you have rounded corners here, it's going to really easily create a face that we can now delete and see the bowl of our sink. So I also have, this faucet area. We can clean up these edges later, but this is the one that we want to delete so that we can see the sink below. All right, same example over here on the fireplace. Go ahead and click on that guy. We can't see our flames or the fireplace box because this face, the material of the entire fireplace is hiding it. So if I tap my X-ray mode, you can see what's going on back there is a fire. So same function. With this, it's again a really dark corner, so I'm going to turn on my monochrome view here and turn off my shadows so we can see a bit better. I'm going to double click into my fireplace assembly until I can select this face. Right click, intersect faces with model, and turn the rest of the model off so you can see what happened. So these stair treads, it also created new faces and edges there. So that's okay, I'm going to leave it there. But something is happening right here that I like to call sneaky faces. We've told SketchUp that we want to separate these edges out, but the face is still sneaking right below it. So if I were to select here and delete, it's deleting the whole thing, and that's not what I'm going for. I just want this one here. So you'll probably run into this in SketchUp. It happens. It's a really easy fix. All you need to do is draw a line, so L for line, and go from endpoint to endpoint. And you're just basically triggering SketchUp to know that, hey, I want to separate out this face. So you need to trigger a heel, basically, of this face. So line from endpoint to endpoint, and then I can delete this face. Now I can see those, what is happening behind this area, behind this face here. You can see my flames. So a really common question, follow-up to this, is, I've cut a hole in this face. What if I want to move my fireplace? So if we want to move it, we need to make sure that we view it, this hole straight on, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a selection box from left to right. Whoop, I got to get into that geometry. Left to right, just to select these faces here. And sometimes it's nice to turn on X-ray mode so that you know you're not accidentally grabbing more than you want, so that when I move this, I'm not wrecking my whole assembly. I just want to grab this guy here. Now I can move that hole around. Also, I can just go ahead and heal that again, and I can just begin to delete that geometry if I want to get rid of the hole altogether. Okay. So let's go ahead and leave that as is now. We are going to talk about the chandeliers in the kitchen. Okay, so back to my working scene, back to top view, and parallel projection. Okay, so those with the sharp eye, notice that this lighting fixture is slightly forward a bit. It's not aligned. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. And I'm going to move it using the move tool right from that middle chord. And I'm going to lock it into the green, hit my left arrow key, and hover over the midpoint. So I've locked this in, left for green, right for red. And I'm going to hover over the midpoint in my island. Sometimes we're not needing the midpoint. Maybe I want them closer to the seating area. So I'm going to grab my tape measure tool again, like using my tape measure, and I'm going to type 18 inches from this edge. Now I can select both of these, held down Shift to select both of them, and move them again, locking on the green and hovering over that intersection right there. Okay, so one last thing about spacing these pendants. If you watched my session yesterday, I talked a bit about spacing the faucets evenly, just yesterday or the day before. I drew a line and then I used the divide function, dividing up a line into segments so that SketchUp would do the math of spacing those out for me. So that's one option that I use for spacing pendants as well. But I'm going to show you a different method, again, using an array. So I'm going to set this guy down, moving along that red axis so that it doesn't move up or down in my model. Just set it down all the way at the end. I'm not going to leave it there. Don't worry. We don't want a chandelier on the edge of our island. But I'm going to create a copy of that and set it down at the opposite end. So this is very similar to that shelving, dropping it into the ceiling and the floor. This is dropping it on both sides of my island. And now I'm going to type 3/enter. And it's placing two pendants evenly spaced right in the middle there. So this spacing isn't always what we're looking for. Maybe we want them a little bit more to the right and the left. So that may be a function where, again, we use that temporary line and divide it to do the math for us. But I'm happy with how that looks. So I'm going to click back on my kitchen view here. Okay, so I have two more tips before we have some time for questions. They're pretty simple. Again, I was talking about shortcuts. I use that hide rest of model function, and that is basically, actually I'm gonna go ahead and click into something so you can see what I'm doing. That's under View, Component Edit, Hide Rest of Model. Is basically what I was doing if you want to take the long route to get there. So when I click off, the rest of the model comes back. When I double click into something else, it's just showing me what group or component that I'm double clicked into. So I like to set a shortcut for that, and that's going to be under SketchUp Preferences. And I was already there because I was practicing. But if you go down to Shortcuts, you can select all of these functions and set a custom shortcut. SketchUp has some default shortcuts, keystrokes. You can see that I've set one for file import. I import a lot of things. That one's Shift-I. But if I start typing hide rest of model, I've tapped the letter Y. Some people like to do H for hide. Mine was Y because it was open. So I really highly suggest setting these shortcuts. Oh, and also if you're a PC/Window user, this preference window is going to be under Window Preferences. Mac users, it's under SketchUp Preferences, Shortcuts. One other that I really like to use is hiding my guidelines. Like I said, I use guidelines a lot. So I like to go to Edit, Delete Guides, and I set that one with the letter W because we are wiping it clean. So that's how I remember that. And I just want to show you really quickly, I create grids quite a bit using guidelines before I draw any geometry. So I end up with a lot of these guidelines in my model. The long route is going to Edit, Delete Guides, and I just like to tap the letter W. My hand's already on the keyboard up there, ready to delete those. My last tip before we move on to questions is to definitely use layout. So I'm going to hop over to my layout document for this drawing. This comes with SketchUp Pro. It's the paper version of your 3D model. I talked about it yesterday. If you just watched Eric's session, he talked about it. Aaron talked about it. We all talked about it. It's awesome. This document, this mood board is created in layout. The site plan with dimensions and these trees are grabbed from the scrapbook layout. This is all coming from the model that I was just showing you. And we can actually double click into these and orbit in our model, change these views. Sorry, I'm getting the beach ball. I'm not sure if you can see that. So we can orbit within. These are all connected to the SketchUp model. So this was a clipping mask. Oh, it's set itself again. If you want to see more about this set of drawings, later on Josh Riley's going to talk in the GE booth. He's going to have a session using the same model, giving a few more tips about placing these appliances. So we could drop that into the chat. That'd be great. And go ahead and check his out later as well, because he's going to use the same file for his. So those are all of my tips that I have prepared. Feel free to ask any questions. I'm going to hop over, try and find the question area again. Okay, so
just a couple in there, but good questions.
Oh, cool. All right, Laura is asking, when you removed the countertop face area within the sink, did you have to remove the bottom face of the countertop as well? Ooh, that's a great question. I don't know if you can see the Q&A on my screen, but Laura's asking if I needed to remove the bottom of this shape as well. And I happened to already remove it. Basically, let me try and get there. Whoop. Whoop. What she's asking is, usually this is what happens. And we can no longer see our sink because we've got the bottom face of our countertop. So sometimes we've got the top face, the bottom face of our countertop, and then we've got the top face of our cabinet. So we've got 3 faces in there to delete. So sometimes, and oftentimes, I will just go ahead and delete that bottom face of the countertop if that works out for me. But a better workflow would probably be, let me turn off the shadows, to go ahead and intersect faces again with that face there, so that you create another shape down here that is even lower, so that it cuts through the same shape of the sink at that point in your countertop. So you can either delete it or intersect faces again on that particular face. Okay, Josh Riley's asking, can you explain how to use that working scene in SketchUp? So great question, Josh. This working scene is basically the first scene that I set every single file. I always have a working scene, and that has the shadows off and my ceiling off. I have some tags set over here. By default, when you open a SketchUp file, there are no scenes set, and there's no tags either except for untagged. That's your default one. But I like to go ahead and have my ceiling on a separate group and a separate tag, so that I can really easily just take that off, so that I'm not having to dip below my ceiling to work on my model. So I add a scene here from a view sort of like this. It's sort of like a top side view. It makes it so I can really easily hop into my model and work on another area. I'm getting better at this as the years go by, but I often get stuck in a wall. I'm sure we all do that from time to time. Sometimes it's hard to get out of the wall, and that's when I will just hop back over to my working scene again. So it's always the first scene I set, and then you can see I've got some scenes over here next to it, and these are my favorite. I just love the documentation side of things. Those are my elevation scenes. But again, it's hard to keep modeling from this elevation scene. So now I'm gonna go ahead and just pop back over working scene. Okay, Jenica is asking, if you need to change the size of the sink, what's the best way to get rid of the hole in the counter? Great question. I'm just gonna go ahead and double click back into here. So similarly with the fireplace, sometimes, I don't know why this doesn't always work for me, it's user error, I'm sure. Sometimes I can just select all of this and hit delete, and that magic trick worked that time, thank goodness. And oh, I got my bottom one, it's gone away. But I can just select that hole and delete it, and it will heal. Other times when that doesn't work, I undo it, and I'll zoom in, and you can see there's actually straight edges here that are trying to appear around from far away. And you can just draw a line from endpoint to endpoint, heal that face, and now I can double click and hit delete. And I can also just draw a selection box around the extra stuff and delete it. Just be sure when you're drawing your selection boxes that you are strategic about which direction you go. You don't want to go from, in this case, right to left. You can see this dashed selection. That selects everything that was touching that box. In this case, I'd like to go left to right and only select what is fully within that box. In this case, those edges. And then I'll hit delete. So hopefully that answers your question, Jenica. Got 5 more minutes. I'm going to check on the chat. Maybe Aaron, oh, where is my chat? Do we have any questions in the chat, Aaron or Aubrey?
Somebody's asking for the rest of the Zoom sessions. We'll post a link. There's only one more actually after this one. Oh, never mind. Corey already found it. So
hey, Corey.
Nicolette was asking about toggling the rest of the model off. I think she's talking about editing components. So.
Oh, okay. Yes. So, yep, that was the shortcut. I think I kind of hopefully covered that. The turning the rest of the model off. I set that as a custom shortcut, hitting the letter Y to bring the rest of the model on and off. But yes, so do we also want to put Josh's GE? Or actually, those are on the sketch. They're on.
They're all up on the
rest
blog.
of it. It's blog.sketchup, or you tell it, or Aaron, I can't remember.
blog.sketchup.com. They're all up there.
Flash event.
We have one more SketchUp session today, which is a Q&A session, which will be right after, well, half an hour after this session ends. And then 3 more GE sessions happening. I was going to say in the GE booth, but there really are no booths anymore. That's just a state of mind that doesn't exist.
Yeah, and it literally, it's not, yeah. Anyway, so yes, 3 more, Q&A, and then 3 more GE sessions. Awesome. We have 4 more minutes, so I'm just going to throw in one more thing, unless anybody has another question. I didn't think I'd have time to show this, so I'm kind of happy that we have time. I want to take this undermount sink a step further, this sink a step further and make it undermount, because I get a lot of questions. They're like, yeah, that's great, but what if the sink is undermount, which so many sinks are these days? So I'm going to right click and do the same thing, intersect faces with model, and delete this guy. Actually, I'm not going to delete that yet. I'm going to leave it. And I'm actually going to push this down 2 inches. So let's say our reveal is 2 inches. Delete that other one. So I've got, it basically is spilling over 2 inches down. And now I can delete this face here. So that's giving me a reveal all the way around. So I actually need to go ahead and drop my sink as well. So I'm going to drop that down. Hit the blue arrow, or sorry, the up arrow to lock that in, and drop it down 2 inches. So if I turn on the monochrome, you can kind of see that a bit better. So now we've undermount the sink, and I didn't make sure that I use the shape on the inside, because there's often another ring. You can kind of see this one started. But we do have some edges to clean up here. So I'm going to double click, and now these become more important. So we got to get rid of those. And we also have these guys. So I can tap the E for eraser, and be sure when you're using tools to look in the lower left-hand corner. Got Option equals soften. So I'm going to hold down my Option key and just soften those edges there. And now this face will appear as one. So that's one option, or I can use, again, that select tool. After cleaning this up, select all of these edges and go to my soften smooth window, and I can play with this slider here and these controls to soften them all at once. So this is really nice because, again, now this face shows as one. Our texture is going to spill right over the edge here. Let's see if I can find a better example. It's better when there's veining, but basically this texture, oh, it's not spilling over the edge. Go ahead and fix that. Sample this and then apply it. Okay, here we go. So now it's spilling over. When there's veining, it's really nice when that texture just continues. Okay, so that is an Undermount Sink, right under the wire, under 1 minute. Yeah, everyone, thanks so much for joining me. And I really enjoyed this week with you all.
Perfect timing. Thank you, Tammy. Thanks for sharing your knowledge as always. And
My
great
pleasure.
presentation.
Thank you. Thanks a bunch. All right, everybody. We'll see you next time.